God works things out. And I was in the hospital visiting my mom this week, and I walked down. My sister and stepdad wanted coffee at San Joaquin's. We went down to Starbucks. I saw Ryan Sheffield, and he was like, "I didn't see you guys up there." And I was like, "I didn't know. You guys on the 4th floor?" I was like, "No, Pastor Gary's on the 5th floor." And I didn't even know Pastor Gary was in the hospital. You didn't know Pastor Gary was in the hospital? I was like, "No, he was in the hospital. I just didn't know he was in this hospital." So then I got up to go see him, and he was staying with Pastor Gary, good spirits, and joking around. It's crazy how God works things out. And one thing I've always loved about this church is making sure to always give God the praise.
Yes.
I mean, even in the things that people think, well, that's a stretch. Like you always hear, and I don't believe it. I believe it. I don't believe in coincidences. I think things happen for a reason. I think that we have the God of the universe, the creator of the world, who's working things behind the scenes for us that we don't always see. And I love how this church is always careful to give God the praise. So that was just kind of what I was thinking as I got up here. But we'll be in Matthew 26. If there's any visitors here, make sure to invite you back to hear our pastor next Sunday. We'll be preaching tonight, and then we'll have a service Wednesday night, and he should be back to the pulpit next Sunday. Matthew 26, begin reading at verse number 6. It says, "When Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment. She poured it on his head as he sat at meat. And his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, 'To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor.' When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For the poor you'll have always with you, but me you will not have always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever the gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall this also that this woman hath done be told a memorial for her. Wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told a memorial for her." Let's pray. God, we come to this time, Lord, we thank you for another day of life. Lord, we thank you for your many blessings. We are so undeserving, but you continue to love us and bless us anyways, and we thank you so much for that. Lord, I pray as we get into the preaching of your word that those under the sound of my voice today, that they didn't come just because this is what we do on Sunday mornings. They didn't come to please their spouse or their parents, Lord, but they came expecting to hear from you. And I pray as your word goes forth, as I preach on the outside, you'll preach on the inside. God, hide me behind the cross. Give me the words to speak. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. There's two verses that stand out. Number one, the first verse was, Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. That ought to make you shout right there, because we need to understand before we go any further, in order for Jesus to be in the house of somebody named Simon the leper, that means that a miracle has already taken place. In order for Jesus and anybody to be around a person named Simon the leper, that means somebody has already been healed of leprosy. Verse number 13, "Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told a memorial for her." That's a really good verse. In a nutshell, he said, hey, wherever, anytime, anywhere the gospel is preached, they're going to be talking about this woman. They're going to be talking about what this woman and what she did. A memorial is something permanent. It's like you go to the graveyards, you see the granite tombs. It's a memorial for their life. In other words, it's a legacy for the life that she's left behind. And I find it interesting that this compliment came from Jesus, the creator of the world. I mean, he said is doing or what she has done is going to be told wherever the gospel is preached. It's going to be her legacy. I think it's important to understand the context of this story. Matthew 26 opens, and it's very, very clear when the chapter opens that Jesus' his ministry and even his life is coming to an end. Matthew 26:1 says, it came to pass when Jesus finished these sayings, and he said to his disciples, after 2 days of the feast of the Passover, the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Up to this point, he's told them 5 times, hey guys, I'm going to die. I'm going to be crucified. They never believed him. They never understood how it was going to work. They never got how the Son of God, how the Savior, how Jesus was going to die. They never understood it. They told them, I'm going to die. The very next verses, the religious leaders are plotting his murder. Verse number 3. They assembled the chief priests, the scribes, the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they would take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. He's going to die. That's how the story we started with opens. He's going to die. His life is coming to an end. Everything that has happened so far is happening in the shadow of his death. It's happening in the shadow of the cross. The attention of the world, the attention of the ages has turned to Jesus. He who knew no sin was about to be made sin for us. The spotless Son of God, who never committed one sin in his entire life, was about to be made our sin sacrifice on the cross. He was going to die. He was going to die. The very next verse goes into the story we started with. Mary's legacy. Mary's legacy. How she was going to be remembered. I want to pause for a moment. I want to do something a little different. I want everybody to close their eyes, please. And I want you to take this time seriously. And I know it's different, it may be weird, but I want you to take this time seriously. And I would like you to imagine that you go to the doctor tomorrow morning and your doctor tells you you have a terminal disease, there's no cure, you have a week to live. I want you to think about it just for a moment. I'm going to put 30 seconds on my clock here, and I want you to think for 30 seconds. I have a week to live. I'm going to die. The clock started. Think about the things that are running through your mind on the idea of if you die in a week, how are you going to be remembered? Really difficult to kind of examine your life. You can open your eyes. It's really difficult to examine your life, whether you're 15 or 75, and think, if I died today, if I died in a week, what are people going to remember me as? And yeah, we want to be remembered as good parents, as good spouses, as kind people, and all that's good, all that's great. But if you died today or died in a week, is anybody going to remember you by anything spiritual? Anything that has eternal values or anything like that? I'll never forget, I went to listen to a guy preach one time a couple of years ago, and I walked up after the service to meet him. I had never met him before, but we had a mutual friend. And our friend said, hey, you need to go listen to this guy. He's going to be in your area. So I went. And I went to meet him afterwards, and I said, hey, man, nice to meet you. We have a mutual friend. He said, who's that? And I told him our friend's name. And I'll never forget, this is all he said. Let's say his name was John. His name wasn't John. If I told you who he was, some of you would know. But let's say his name was John. This is all the preacher said. He said, man, John loves Jesus. That's all he said. said, it was great to meet you, and kind of walked away a minute or two later. That's all he said. He said, man, John loves Jesus. And I'll never forget how I felt in that moment. That's like one of the greatest compliments that you can get. And I don't know if it's because I'm a preacher and that's just how I feel. I don't know, but I remember thinking, man, if somebody ever said, hey, we have a mutual friend, who's that, Oliver? And the guy's like, Oliver loves Jesus. I mean, if somebody told me that, I'd be running laps. I mean, that's just the greatest compliment that you could get. Yeah, they could say, hey man, he's a great dad, he's a great mom, a great father, or a great husband, wife. I mean, oh, that's good. It's good to be known by those things. But how about, hey, that person loves Jesus? What a compliment of that person's life that, hey, they love Jesus. And I tell you, we have Matthew now, we've had him for about 7 months, and it really is a lot of kind of examining our life and how are we going to raise this kid, and how are we going to assure that he grows up to be halfway decent and he grows up to love Jesus, and how are we going to do this? And when he does grow up, what kind of life is he going to live? What kind of values is he going to exude? I mean, what kind of person is he going to be? And then what are we going to leave him with when we're dead and gone? What are we going to leave him with? I mean, yeah, we can leave him with a life insurance, and we can leave him with an education, and we can leave him with all this stuff, but what's truly important is, does he know how to get from here to there? Does he know how to live? When they say, hey, tell me about your dad, what's he going to say? Oh, my dad was great. I mean, he had a pretty good job, and he took me to these places, and he taught me how to do this. But what is he going to say about the eternal values that I'm leaving him behind? All that stuff can come and go. I mean, we have a lot of stuff, and we do a lot of stuff, but none of that is important up against Jesus. And I start thinking about that, and I mean, we've had him for 7 months. I don't have all the answers. We don't know what we're doing a lot of the time. Danielle does, but I don't. I always want to leave him in the car. Like, I don't understand what's the big deal. Like, he already knows. I need to run into Salty's to get a tri-tip sandwich. I don't want to take him out of the car and put him back in. And he hates when he gets in that car seat, or he loves to get out, he hates to get in. And I don't understand. Like, just leave him in there. What's going to happen in 2 minutes? What's going to happen? He's trapped in a car seat. He can't get out and walk away. I don't understand. But I'm going to leave the AC on. It's not going to be, I don't know. What's going to be deal with it. But I think about, so I don't have all the answers, obviously. But we think, man, I'm responsible for this kid. How are we going to do this? What are we going to leave him with? But even you, as you closed your eyes for a couple seconds, and hopefully you took that time, seriously, what were you thinking about? Yeah, my kids will have some nice things to say about how I raised them. Well, what does any of that matter up against Jesus? I want to talk to you today quickly. I'm not going to preach long, but I want to talk to you on the idea of how will you be remembered? We know how Mary is remembered, but how will you be remembered? And Mary's legacy is being talked about again today, 2018 years later. It's been talked about for ages, and every generation since she did, it's been talked about. It's been studied what this woman did, her act of love and devotion and sacrifice and adoration of Jesus. And when she gave Jesus her very best, she gave Jesus everything, and it's still being talked about today. It wasn't done in front of the TV cameras, it wasn't uploaded to Instagram or Snapchat, but it's been talked about in every age since she did it. Because she gave her very best. And when we give our very best to Jesus, that's what matters. That's what's important. And He will never forget. He'll never forget what you do for Him. You need to understand that God never forgets what we do. He never forgets why we do it. And with that thought in mind, it behooves the question, how are you going to be remembered? Because the truth of the matter is, every single one of us are leaving a legacy. As we live day by day, it builds our testimony, it builds our legacy. Every single day, you're building this legacy that you're going to leave behind. That when you die, people are going to remember you by that. And how is that legacy going to be? I want to tell you this. Temporal achievements are at best temporary, but eternal accomplishments will be remembered forever and forever and forever. There's 3 segments to this story rather quickly. Number 1, we see the demonstration. The demonstration. Matthew 26, verse number 6. And when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box, very precious ointment, and she poured it on his head as he sat at meat. Bethany was a town located at the foot of the Mount of Olives. It was the hometown of Lazarus, Mary and Martha, his sisters. We have 3 accounts of this story. We're reading Matthew's account. John's account in John chapter number 12, he opens with this story, and he tells us as he sat at meat that Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were all present. They're all there, brothers and sisters, and then there's Simon. In John 12, it says, Jesus, 6 days after the Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, which was dead, whom he raised from the dead. They made him a supper. Martha served, Lazarus was one of them, and sat at the table with him. And Mary took a pound of ointment, a spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Our text says they were in Simon the leper's house. You have Simon the leper, you have Lazarus, you have Mary, you have Martha. Some scholars, they say that Simon was Martha's husband. There's no proof of that. We don't know that. Some say that he was all of their father. These were his kids, and there's also no proof of that. But we do know that they were in Simon the leper's house, somebody that Jesus had healed of leprosy. We know he had been healed because in the Levitical law, you couldn't be around anybody that had leprosy. They went down to a leper colony, but when anybody came within seeing distance of them, they had to run out to the street or run out front of their house, and they'd yell, unclean, unclean, get away, I have leprosy. And of course, when you heard those words, you ran in the other direction because you didn't want to get leprosy. Jesus is sitting here. They are enjoying a good home-cooked meal, and being a food enthusiast, aka fatty, that I am, I wonder what that meal was. We know it wasn't pork chops because these were Jews. They couldn't have pork. So I think it was fried chicken. Really, really good. Albertsons has great fried chicken. Homemade fried chicken is delicious. So they had fried chicken. They had mashed potatoes, some gravy. I want to get you excited. I want to get you excited. Can't have any. Some gravy. The gravy that's made homemade from the grease of the fried chicken. Anybody testify this morning? Man, they were eating good. They had some pineapple upside down cake for dessert. It's one of my favorites. They're sitting there and they're enjoying a good time of food and fellowship. Simon, I believe, is expressing his appreciation for the Lord. I mean, Jesus means a lot to these people. I mean, he was the guest. More than likely, he was sitting at the head of the table. But just think for a moment about what went on around that table. I mean, you have Jesus there, you have Lazarus, you have Simon the leper, you have Mary, you have Martha running around serving and sitting and serving and sitting. But what went on around that table? I think when something like this, that Simon said, hey, did I ever tell you guys that I was a leper? I had to leave my wife and my kids and move down to the leper colony. I mean, I had to be all alone, and I was so miserable, and I was so lonely living down in the leper colony. And not only that, but my skin and my flesh was literally rotting away. Body parts were falling off. I was in excruciating pain. I mean, unbearable torment. I was miserable. But one day, I saw Jesus walking by the way, healed me. Lazarus takes a bite out of his chicken wing and he says, man, that ain't nothing. That ain't nothing. I was dead. I was dead. Hey, Simon, rain on your little leper story. I was dead. I mean, not only was I dead, but I'd been dead for 4 days. My body was literally rotting away. I was in grave clothes. I was dead. There was no coming back from this. One day, Jesus came walking by the graveyard. I don't know how he did it, I don't know why he did it, but he said, hey, Lazarus, come forward. I got up and I walked out of the grave. Amen. I was alive. Amen. Man, I would have been a fly on that wall. Amen. That's not in the Bible, but that's what I think happened. I think it was pretty close to that. And then we had Mary. And I don't know why she did it. I don't know if it was because she was in this environment with these men and the miracles that she probably saw firsthand. Of course, with her brother she did, depending on their relationship with Simon. I mean, she saw firsthand the miracles that Jesus performed. And I don't know, it's from her being around that table. She's like, okay, Lazarus is going to be remembered for the guy that Jesus raised from the dead. Simon's going to be remembered for, the guy Jesus healed of leprosy. What am I going to be remembered as? I mean, I got to do something. I don't know if it was that. Or I don't know if she was around that environment and it solidified for her, this is the Son of God. This is the Savior. And she was just in awe of Jesus. And she said, I need to give him everything I got. I need to give him my very best. I love him. I'm in awe of him. Let me tell you this. My mind's racing, and this just popped in my head. I don't know how this is going to sound yet. I want you to think for a moment. If you haven't given Jesus your very best, if you haven't put Jesus first, I believe it's because you're not in awe of him. And that makes sense to me, because I would think that when you become in awe of Jesus, who he is, for being the Son of God, for being our sacrifice on the cross, for being our Savior, and you're saying, man, this is it. I mean, this is God. This is the Son of God. This is the King of Kings. I mean, I got to give him everything. You can have it. Nothing I own, nothing I possess is mine. I mean, you can have everything. That's what happens when you come in contact with Jesus and you're just in awe of him. If you haven't done that, and this is probably hard to agree with, digest, if you haven't given Jesus everything, your best, maybe it's because you're not in awe of him. You're not in awe of the person, Jesus, the God of the universe. You're not in awe of him. That's why you haven't given him your best. I don't know what's... Maybe she was in awe of him. She said, man, this is it. I got to give him everything. So regardless of why, there's 3 accounts of this. I love that. And we know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they kind of all say the same thing, but there's a lot of stories that there's only 1 or 2, but we have 3 accounts of Mary doing this. Matthew says that she went and took the ointment and she poured it on Jesus' head. That's what Matthew says. John said that it was down on his feet. And what a lot of scholars or theologians believe, because it says in verse number 12, Jesus is talking, and he says, she did it for my burial, which is going to be in a week. A lot of people believe that it got on his entire body. She started with his head and worked her way down all the way to his feet. And then we know in John's account that she's wiping his feet with her hair. So, we believe that this was just all over Jesus' body. What was this? In John's account, he calls it spikenard. If you study it out, it's very costly, very precious. It was a red tinted ointment that comes from a plant that was grown in India. They didn't have what we have today. They didn't have FedEx and Amazon Prime, you get it the next day. No, they didn't have any of that. It would come in I don't know how it would come, camels and other things. So in order to get it from India to Israel, to wherever they were at, it cost a lot of money. It wasn't $3.99 shipping and handling. I mean, it was super expensive to get it to where they were. It was very expensive, very thick, very sticky oil, and it was used for one purpose. Jesus kind of tells us in verse number 12, but it was used to embalm people. Fun fact, we were in Panama a couple weeks ago, and Panama doesn't have embalming. I don't know why, but the missionary we were there, he tells us a term in Spanish, and I don't remember it, because I'm such a great Hispanic, but he said they have a term, like we say, you'd be here today and gone tomorrow. They have that same term in Spanish, and it's like literally because they have a 24-hour burial process. You die, you need to be buried within 24 hours. So that's a pretty fun fact. I was like, well, that's pretty crazy. You can literally be here today and gone tomorrow. But it was used to embalm people. That's what it was used for. But in verse number 12, Jesus said, she's doing it for my burial, which is going to be 7 or 8 days later. It was a strong, consecrated aroma that when you put it on something, you couldn't get it off. That's why they would put it on a dead body. It would last through the deterioration process until they were buried. It was very expensive. John chapter number 12, when the disciples started scoffing at her, it tells us, Judas tells us that it was worth 300 pence. 300 pence. Anybody know how much 300 pence was? A year's wages. 1 year's wages. That was average. This woman could have been poorer than that. It could have been 2 years' wages. We don't know. But from what I read and study, in today's currency, it was anywhere from $20,000 to $35,000. Wow. That's a ton of money. Just to pour on somebody, I mean, that's a lot of money. And the reason why Mary had this ointment, we believe, is for her own burial. She said, I'm going to give Jesus everything. Poor Lazarus, I don't even know what Lazarus got, but he didn't get this. His little brother, he died a couple days ago. He didn't get this. She was going to give Jesus her very best. $20,000, $35,000, I mean, that is a ton of money. And that day, it was very common, very normal, that when you had a guest, you would take a drop of perfume and you would put it on their head. Does anyone know why they did that? Because they stunk. They smelled good. I mean, they didn't have the stuff that I had. They would travel on camels and donkeys, and when they got somewhere, they didn't smell good, so they put a drop of perfume on their head. But it was not common. In fact, it was completely unheard of to do what Mary is doing. To break open the bottle and just pour out all of its contents, and to pour out all of this spikenard. This stuff was expensive. You didn't do this in that day. There was no doubt that Mary was giving her very best. She gave her all in worship and admiration to the Savior. She didn't use this for herself. She didn't use this for her brother. But the Bible says in John 3 that she emptied it on John 12:3 that she emptied it on Jesus. It says that the odor filled the house. I find it interesting that it says that. It kind of gives us some detail. You walk up and you smell it outside. You smell it in the house. You can imagine it smelled pretty good on Jesus. It's covered. It's made to get into your pores and to stay there. So I want you to think as we continue that Jesus made it clear that she was doing this for his burial. She pours it on him. Then, verse number 2, we see the discouragement. The discouragement. Mary just got done giving her very best to Jesus. She said, hey, God, you can have it all. I give you everything. I place more value on you than I do on me. You can have everything. And look what happened. Number 2. Matthew 26, verse number 8, when the disciples saw it, who's giving out the discouragement? It wasn't those Pharisees. It wasn't those Sadducees. It wasn't the lawyers. It was the church. It was the disciples. It was the Christian people, the Christ followers. You ever figured out that church people can be some of the meanest people around? They can be some of the meanest people around. we tried to spiritualize it, and so did they when they said, oh, we can give it to the poor. We tried to spiritualize it when we run somebody down, when we criticize somebody. I remember when we were in Arkansas a lot, Jason and Aretha, you'd hear it all the time. People would say something that, with their such sweet southern accents, they would say something bad about somebody, and then they would say, oh, bless their heart. In the same breath. Here we don't say that, but we say other things like, well, we run them through the mud and say, oh, God help them. I was with a group of people a while back, and they were saying, we have a prayer request. We have a prayer request. That's what we do. Hey, let me tell you about a prayer request, and then you run somebody through the mud, and oh, we need to pray for them. Christian people are some of the worst, meanest people that you could be around. When the disciples saw it, they had indignation and said, to what purpose is this waste? It's a waste. This ointment could have been sold for much and given to the poor. They were trying to get spiritual. And John 12:4 tells us that Judas was the very one that started this, but all the disciples chimed in, and they tried to discredit and discourage such an act of love and devotion and admiration for Jesus. What a sad scene it must have been when Mary thought, hey, I'm in all of this, man. I'm going to give him my very best. I'm going to give him everything. And then around the room, people start laughing at her, and start scoffing at her, start making fun of her. The word indignation means angry, displeased. It also means the snorting of a horse. In today's lingo, we would say they were scoffing at her, mad at her, just sitting there with an angry look, just like scoffing at what she was doing for Jesus. They were disgusted. They were not just angry. The word indignation, it implies they were angry to the point they wanted to hurt somebody. I mean, these were guys that were just disagreeing. They were angry with what was happening. And they yelled out, what a waste! What a waste! Twice that word is used, what a waste. Think for just a moment. These are the guys that 3.5 years ago left everything for Jesus. Jesus said, hey, follow me, and they threw their fishing poles and their fishing nets, and they left their dad, and some of them left their spouses and their families. They left everything and followed Jesus. 3.5 years later, somebody is giving Jesus their very best, and they're laughing at him. They're making fun of him. What happened? What happened? Did they not think that Jesus was worthy of such a gift? 3.5 years later, they're making fun of her giving her very best to Jesus. Have you ever noticed that how people react when somebody kind of goes overboard with serving Jesus? See, it's okay to be a Christian. I want to be a Christian. I want people to know I love Jesus. I just don't want to be a fanatic about it. I just don't want to be a nut about it. I mean, I want to love Jesus, but I don't want to be crazy about it. Somebody goes crazy about it, man, that person's a nut. Walking with a cross down Chester Avenue, that person's crazy. Preaching on the side of the road, that person, he's not all there. If they love Jesus that much, they must not be all there. But it's okay in the Super Bowl Sunday, it's okay to go home and shout and jump and scream and holler when your team is winning or your team is losing. That's okay to be a sports fan. It's okay to love hunting and fishing and all those other things, but you get in the house of God and you get a little excited. It's not okay. Listen, and that's me too. A lot of sports. Packers are playing, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be watching. I'm going to be hooting and hollering and jumping. And that's the way I'm going to be. Then we come to the house of God and we're like, when the Packers lose, it's not very often when they do, I prize. When the Chiefs lose, they yell cussings. Making sure you're paying attention. Listen, it's okay to do. It's okay to like all that other stuff, but when you go overboard for Jesus, that's not okay. I'm glad you guys are paying attention. We don't have a problem with all that other kind of stuff. We sometimes have a problem when we hear about somebody who just goes overboard, and we have more than just a problem. Oftentimes, listen to me, this is not the truest statement you've heard. People go overboard for Jesus, and what do? This is what we do. We say, it's just a phase. Get over it. Give him a couple weeks. Our minds as Christians, and I'm saying our minds, have become so jaded to the Lord Jesus Christ and what He's done for us and what He means for us, that we look at other people and we say, it's just Number 3, we see the defense. Jesus sees what happens, and automatically He rises to defend her. Verse number 10, it says, when Jesus understood it, I don't have time to preach it because I'm already over time, but aren't you glad that we serve a God who understands it? Whatever you're going through, He understands it. He's at the pain, He's at the backstabbing, He's at the torture, both physically, emotionally. He's at all that, He understands it. It says Jesus understood it. He said to them, why trouble ye the woman? She had wrought a good work on me. For the poor you have not always, for the poor you're always have with you, but me you're not always going to have with me. He kind of redirects the focus of His disciples and says, hey, listen, she gets it. You're not, I've been telling you and telling you and telling you, you don't understand it. But Mary understands that my time on earth is limited. And I have a week left. And you guys are making fun of the woman who understands it. It says that she's wrought a good work on me. That word good means beautiful in the original language. What they were calling wasteful, Jesus was calling beautiful. Amen. While defending Mary, Jesus tries to redirect the focus and let His disciples know, hey, Mary has seized the opportunity. She gets it. How often we miss the opportunity? We miss the opportunity to understand what Jesus wants for us, wants to do with us. Mark 14:8, His account, I love this, He said, she had done what she could. Listen, when I talk about, I'm almost done. When I talk about your legacy and what you leave behind, I'm not talking about, hey, you need to be a person that is remembered for winning thousands to Christ. You're crazy. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, are you doing what you can? Are you giving your best? We don't all need to be remembered and have a legacy like Billy Graham or any of those people. I'm talking about you specifically. Are you giving your best? Are you doing your best? It says she had done what she could. Are you doing what you can with what God has given you? Are you doing what you can? Jesus made it clear that Mary understood more than anyone in the room that day. She got it. She got the plan of God. She knew He was about to die. She understood. And then I'm going to close with this. With the amount of Brother Lee, get a song. Give me 2 minutes. With the amount of spikenard that was used, we believe it got all over him. It got into his pores. 6 days later, he was taken, arrested, went through fake trials. He was beaten. He was brutalized. His beard was ripped out. Cat of 9 tails 39 times. I mean, he went through the worst pain you could ever imagine for you and for me. And through all that, then he got hung up on a cross. Post went into the ground, his shoulders dislocated from the weight, his ribs popped down. I mean, he was in excruciating pain. He had minimal time to live. He couldn't breathe because his ribs have dislocated. He can't breathe. The way you die from crucifixion is by suffocation. You can't breathe. It's not the pain, it's not the loss of blood. Even though you're in excruciating pain, you're losing a ton of blood. But the way you die is because you cannot breathe. You suffocate. So as our Lord, Jesus Christ, is there on the cross. He's struggling to breathe. The only way you can breathe is to push up on that spike in your ankles and pull up on those spikes in your wrist. And you just take a short breath because that's all you can do because you're in excruciating pain. And I believe because of all of the pain he's gone through, no doubt he was sweating profusely, bleeding everywhere. All of that is coming through his pores. And what if in those final moments as he's rising up just to take a short breath, he's about to die, and he takes a breath and he smells that spikenard. He smells it. And what if he thought, man, I did this for 30.5 years, ministry for 3.5 years. John talks about thousands of people following him and then they unfollowed him. We know he had 12 disciples. We know he had 120 in the upper room. That's all he had at the end of his ministry. But what if he thought out of all those people, there was one person who got it? Mary understood. Mary got it. She understood the plan of God. She gave me her very best. One person loved me. One person gave me their all. When it truly mattered, there was one that got it. And as he's struggling in those final breaths just to lean up and
take a breath. What if he smelled all that spider coming out of his pores? And it put just a little crack of a smile on Nancy and God. In his last breaths, I think there's a good possibility he was remembering Mary. And I want to ask you this. How are you going to be remembered? Is your life a sweet-smelling savor to Jesus? Does he look at you and smile and say, man, my kid's doing good? Does he look down and say, man, why is he doing that? Can't even look upon sin and has his head turned around. What is he looking at when he sees you? How are you going to be remembered? It's tough message. Sunday is supposed to be a great day, but it's important to examine your life because we don't know when our last day is going to be and think, how are you going to be remembered? How are you going to be remembered? How is Oliver going to be remembered? Let's put some names to it to make it personal. How's Oliver going to be remembered? How's Pastor Gary Long going to be remembered? How is Hildo Perales going to be remembered? How's Brian Sheffield going to be remembered? How are you going to be remembered? Let's stand up.